Hey, welcome back everyone. It's me, Mr. 4K Upscaler. So, my previous video, obviously, it was blocked. It was something I wanted to show you that has to do with HDMI and the flickering that HDMI produces on this TV. And obviously, the video was blocked because I made a mistake. I shown a little bit of footage of Ghost in the Shell, and the video was blocked, so I had to remove the video. So sorry about that. I should have known. You can't be showing any movie footage, otherwise we'll get removed immediately, especially if it's a big Hollywood movie. Excuse me. So, having said that, let's continue. This is by request. I had one of my subscribers requested of me to do a Gears of War 4 on Xbox One S on this TV. By the way, the TV you're looking at, it's 55p605 55-inch Roku 4K HDR Dolby Vision full array of local dimming TV. And obviously here you can see it's running in HDR 10. So let me show you so far on what I have cooked up here. I like to use the word, instead of calibration, I like to say cooked up. What I have cooked up here in terms of settings. I know it's going to be funny using the word cooked, but hey, this is my recipe. It is what it is. Okay, so TV brightness. Since this is HDR, right? We're watching HDR, playing HDR game. We want the TV brightness to be the brighter, especially on this TV because it only has that standard, which is what 700 something nits of peak brightness, which is equal to the OLED, honestly. All right, I think the peak brightness that you're seeing here, it's equal to the OLED peak brightness that's on the C7. And picture mode, I chose to go with the dark HDR because dark HDR just gives me a better natural tone of color. There's normal and there's brighter, but with normal it's too cool. I'm not a huge fan of that cool tone of color. You know what I mean? Dark just gives me that better tone of color. It gives me a better tone of color, so I choose to go with a dark. Normal, it's too cool, and I don't like that blue UV light. So, and you can see that blue. I don't know if you guys can see it or not, but it's definitely present there. So we're gonna keep it on the dark HDR. Picture size, you always want to go with a direct because direct, it's the original ratio of the game. Okay, so you want to use direct. You can use automatic as well, but I just like to use a direct just to be on the safe side that I'm getting the exact same ratio that the game was intended to be. So let's go jump into the advanced picture settings. All right, this should be by now very clear and self-explanatory for everyone that local dimming zones, in order for you to get that 72 local dimming zones on this 55-inch TV, you will have to have local contrast to the high. Okay, if you don't want to see that bending light, if you want your deep dark levels to be as dark as possible, then you want to make sure that you have your local contrast to the high, which is 72 local dimming zones. I know I said 73 yesterday. I made a mistake. I double checked. It is 72, which is pretty darn good for a 55-inch TV. All right, so now the uniformity, the grayscale of this TV, uniformity, it's okay. It could have been better, but it's, look, for $600, this is a decent uniformity. It's not the best, but it's definitely a decent uniformity. So always leave this on high. Don't ever mess with the local contrast. Make sure you keep this on high at all times. Same thing here, those three in the shape of a letter E, those three you want to always keep at 100 backlit. brightness at 50, and contrast on 100. I'm sorry. So these three you always want on 150 and 100, okay? Meaning you'll never have to worry about this. Those four right here, local contrast high, backlit 100, brightness 50, and contrast 100, you never want to mess with that. And someone will say, well, why is it you don't want to touch brightness? Here's the reason why I don't want to touch brightness. Because you already got your local contrast at high. If I move the brightness, look what happens. If I move the brightness, let's say to 30, look what's going to happen to this picture. Look at this. You're crushing your deep dark levels. You're crushing them. They're crushed. This is why you never mess with this. This is why you always leave this on a 50. Like this. Okay? Because the idea of calibration, as I mentioned that yesterday on my video, The Last of Us, is you're looking for a balance. And what does the balance means? All right. Shadows has to be detailed. You got to be able to see them shadows. You got to be able to see the smoke. You got to be able to see that peak brightness in detail. So you got to look for that balance. Same thing with the color. People oversaturate their colors. I've seen people just like use a paint. Oh, it's like using a can of paint and just pouring that paint over the screen. Don't want to do that either. Okay? You know, and this comes honestly, and some people probably are not going to want to hear this, comes with the lack of knowledge. I'm sorry, guys. You got to study this. You got to learn about this a little bit. You have to understand what calibration is. Now, I'm using my own set of eyes to calibrate. I'm not using the equipment to calibrate. And I know people say, well, you got to use the equipment. I understand that. I get it. But since I have a little bit of knowledge, and I study this for a little bit now, and my own two eyes can tell exactly how much of what type of color of tone do I need, and how much color do I need. Because I know the rules. I know the rules of calibration. And the rules of calibration is you don't want to oversaturate anything. Whether it's the contrast, whether it's the brightness, whether it's the sharpness, and whether it's the color. And if you watch these professional calibrators, if you go to their videos, hell, if you even ask Vincent, he will tell you they're all looking for the balance of the picture. That's all they're looking for. When they're looking at the grayscale, when they're looking at the white balance, when they're looking at the contrast ratio, first of all, the way they're going to calibrate the TV, it's based on what type of panel it is, okay? So depending on what type of panel it is, they're going to calibrate that TV based on that panel. In other terms, what I'm trying to say is you do not want to go above the threshold of what the standard is, okay? And even if you look at my even if all of you out there who are professional calibrators, you guys can come to this video and you will probably come to the conclusion that I am still keeping, even though I'm not using equipment, I'm using my own two eyes, I'm still keeping to the rules of the calibration, the standard of calibration. As you can see, I have my TV on brightness brighter. Why? Because this is an HDR. We need that peak brightness here. Even though it's not a high peak brightness, but it's 700 nits, still I wanted it brighter. I chose a picture mode on dark HDR because I felt that it's just my own personal preference, that the warm color, warm tone of color looks better than the blue UV light cool. And then if you come here to my advanced picture settings, you will see I keep my local dimming to the 72 zones, as would calibrators would recommend it to begin with. And same thing here, a professional calibrator would look at this and say, okay, you got a backlit 100, checkpoint, good. You have brightness at 50, makes sense, checkpoint, because you already have local contrast at high, you're not crushing your deep dark levels, 50, check. Contrast at 100, HDR, check. Now sharpness and 10, and they're gonna agree. You don't want to use sharpness way too high to outline the picture. You want to keep it as low as possible, because majority of calibrators, they will tell you that. Color at 55, they will probably say leave it at 50, but for this TV, they will probably say color at 55. That's pretty much the basic. This way, you're in the balance zone. I'm in the balance zone, means that I'm not oversaturating anything. Okay? So everything that I show you here, it's still, even though I'm using my own two eyes, still I'm keeping by the standards. I'm using the standards to calibrate this. Meaning the standards that the CalMan software and all of their equipment that comes with it to measure all of this would pretty much end up being the same as what you're seeing here. Okay? So as you can see, sharpness 10, color 45. Tint, I never mess with that. And that's pretty much how I work, people. And as you will see, it looks good. It looks good. It looks detailed. It looks good. I'll bring my camera a little bit closer so you guys can see it a little bit better. Like this. You see, even in the dark, you can see the detail, meaning that the deep dark levels are not crushed. They're evenly matched here, even here. You will see. Here, let's do a little gameplay here, really quick. Look at the detail on the smoke here. It's even up perfectly. And it looks excellent for the Xbox One S, okay? This HDR right now on this TV looks really good for this TV. Remember, we're calibrating on a TV that's a budget TV. If I was calibrating this on a Z9D, then yes, I would be able to do some other things on it as well. But I'm calibrating based on what I have here. And what I have here, it's 72 local dimming zones, which gives me those deep dark levels, and a standard wide color gamut. I don't know how many colors. I don't know what's the measurement of colors, but I guess it's the standard. Whatever the standard measurement of the colors is, obviously Samsung KS8000 has a higher ratio spectrum of wide color gamut. Therefore, it's the most requested premium HDR patch. That's why it has that Ultra HD Premium patch to it, because it has that premium wide color gamut of colors thanks to the quantum dot nanocells, and of course the over 1400 peak brightness nits, which it's mandatory for HDR to truly get that detail. But again, this is a budget TV. Okay, you're spending $600, and if you're lucky enough, you can get it for $500. So you're not like buying something state of the art. You know, you're getting an entry level double format of HDR. And I think it's possible that this TV might be able to, with the update, if you can read Dolby Vision in HDR, I think the metadata that's built into this TV processor should be able to have hybrid log gamma and Technicolor Advanced HDR. It should be able to have that with the update, because it already has the metadata to read and compress that signal of HDR. I don't know how many of you guys understand how the HDR processing works and the metadata and all that, but Google is your friend, as they say. Use the Google, learn, study. That's what I've been doing in my free time. Sometimes I would go to Barnes and Nobles and I would pick up a book, grab some cup of coffee, and then sit on the desk and read about some of these things, you know, about panels and HDR and how did HDR started and who originally designed the HDR. Believe it or not, the original designers of the HDR, high dynamic range, was Dolby Laboratories, and then they sold their HDR to third parties out there. They sold it, and everybody else licensed it, patented it, and then they created the HDR. But it was originally by Dolby Vision, and you guys can look it up and you will see that it was originally Dolby Laboratories, what I'm trying to say. Dolby Laboratories was the one that actually started with the whole high dynamic range process. Of course, now we have different types. We have hybrid log gamma. We got Technicolor, Advanced HDR. So basically there's 4 HDR formats right now. They're in place. There's HDR10, Dolby Vision. The 2 most common ones you will see, it's HDR and Dolby Vision. Hybrid log gamma it's something that's still in works. And of course, Advanced HDR by Technicolor, it's also in works. So we'll have to wait for that one. As you can see, it looks great. There's a nice range of detail in the dark areas, and that's what you're looking for when you're calibrating a game or a movie. Is you want to see that detail, because if you're not seeing that detail, that means that you're not seeing the true potential of what the developers of the game and then what the filmmaker of a movie intended you to see. Okay, they intended you to see all of the sets and detail in the movie, just like the game developers want you to see all of this detail in the game. They work so hard into a game, they want you to experience that. So this is why it's important. As you can see, it looks great on this TV for an HDR Xbox One S version. Obviously, PC version is more superior in terms of native 4K resolution and graphics. You guys can check some of those videos that I have from PC. We'll see how the Xbox One X version is going to look. Obviously, the Xbox One version will look probably similar to the PC. I can't see any other way than being exactly what I have shown you on a PC version. And that's pretty darn good for a console. So there you have it, guys. Hopefully you find this video informative. Let me show you my settings one more time. TV brightness brighter, HDR dark, picture size direct always, advanced picture settings, local contrast, local dimming zones always at high, so you can take the advantage of 72 zones of local dimming. These 3 right here you never touch. Leave the backlit at 100, contrast at 100, and brightness at 50. So you never mess with those 3. Here I felt sharpness should be at 10 because I don't want to see those jackies outlined. I want to keep them smooth, keep it at 10. Color I felt 45 because remember, I don't want to pour the can of paint of color over my panel. I don't want to oversaturate my colors, so I keep the color 45. Okay, remember, we're looking for that standard balance calibrating detail here. You don't want to oversaturate your colors ever. It's not just me saying this. You can ask any professional. They'll tell you do not want to oversaturate your colors, period, especially in the HDR. Color temperature, I always feel warm is the most healthiest way for you to view the tone of picture, because warm doesn't have that blue UV light that will just damage your eyes, man. So keep it on warm. So there you have it. Hopefully you guys write this stuff down, and thank you for watching. It's Mr. 4K Upscaler. This was Gears of War 4 on Xbox One S, 4K 60Hz, HDR10 calibration, and I'll see you guys in the next video.